Formula One makes its way to the track with the loudest fans, the most passionate people, and some of the fastest speeds on the calendar year. This is the Monza GP. This track holds a special place in many people's hearts, and if you're a Formula One fan, you definitely love seeing this track, whether that be in person or on TV. It's been around for ages, it had a crazy track layout a long time ago, and the moments here have been insane for years on years. Starting off when in 1976, Niki Lauda returned to Formula One after his insane, almost fatal accident in the German GP. He only missed out on 2 races, and then to come back from such a scary incident showed the heart that Niki Lauda had. What an incredible driver, and always somebody that will be remembered for our sport. He even ended up finishing 4th place in the race, which is just exceptional considering what happened to him just a couple of GPs ago. In 1988, somehow Senna and Prost both actually ended up DNFing out of the race, which was actually insane for the dominant year that was happening in 1988, which ended up resulting in both Ferrari drivers finishing a 1-2 shortly after the passing of Enzo Ferrari, which is just symbolic for this beautiful GP. Moving on more recently to Vettel's first victory, and that in a Toro Rosso. He ended up winning in 2008 in a pretty wet, very confusing GP, but to win it in a car that was so far from the fastest car, and this was pretty much considered his rookie season, showed the amount of talent that Vettel had, and we knew we had a prodigy incoming into our sport. It was the record at the time, but then Max ended up breaking it 8 years later due to being so young. But the record before was a 21-year-old, and then now Max is the 18-year-old winner. 2014 also had a couple of dive bomb beauties by Ricciardo. This was pretty much the start of the Ricciardo hype train. He was brilliant in this Red Bull, and when the cars were lighter and more agile, we saw Ricciardo pull off some crazy moves, especially the fake dummy that he pulled off going into that chicane was just a beauty to watch. 2019 had probably one of the most famous victories here in Italy, which was Charles Leclerc winning. After he won in Spa, he wins in Monza. Iconic, his reaction after, considering what had happened even in the previous GP, with one of his fond friends passing away as well. It was just an incredible moment for Leclerc. And it was quite the fight with Lewis. Even if it was a little bit on the edge, it was such entertainment to watch. The year right after that, Pierre Gasly gets his first victory here, so this GP just keeps providing and providing for us. What an incredible moment. The radio is still one of my favorites that I've ever heard. Gasly shows off the passion of winning in a car, yet again, like Vettel, defying the odds in a car that's far from the fastest.
Oh my God! What did you do? What did you do?
Then the year after that, Daniel Ricciardo wins in 2021 after a pretty big slump he had this year. This slump then continued into 22. He seems to have found a good run of form right now, but this was a huge victory in the time and actually a 1-2 for Ricciardo and Lando. And infamously, to help out with his victory, Lewis and Max collided in 2021. Pretty iconic moment of Max toppling Lewis, and very controversial still to this day. The unforgettable moments in Monza will always continue as this track is on the calendar. It's one of those tracks that you can never take off. It's like a Spa, it's like a Monaco. It's got to stick or it's not Formula One. There isn't too much to this track. It's a very simple track. There's not too many turns, but man, does it provide some action because of its straight line and the way that the DRS zones are set up, and those hard braking zones really help out with overtakes. Looking at the track and going over some numbers, there is going to be 53 laps here, which isn't a lot, but actual lap itself is about a 125, 126 in the race per lap. And we're going to be looking at a downforce of 1. The braking is going to be a 4, could even be a 5 depending on how you judge it. Tire stress is actually pretty high here because most cars are running low downforce. The actual track itself doesn't provide as much tire stress, but We do know that it's resurfaced now, so that could actually make it a little bit more slidey as well. And finding grip in practice 1, 2, and 3 will be very important for the drivers. Traction can also be difficult, and as I said, sometimes that sliding can really tear up those tires. A one stop is more than likely to happen here. It's typically the strategy, and it's typically what teams go for because it is the most efficient. Only if like a safety car pops up, but considering the reliability on these cars, I doubt we're going to see a safety car unless some big crash happens, which it has happened here in Monza before, so there is a possibility. The teams will be running a C3, C4, and C5, and this is because of the low tire stress, but it actually ends up providing a better race for us. And by the end of the first stint, you will see the cars struggle specifically through turns 6 and 7, and then 8, 9, and 10. That's where a lot of the drivers are going to lift to try and help out the tires, but at the cost of lap time, and also if you don't have good tire degradation like the Aston Martin, it could prove difficult throughout the race. The first chicane was also modified, a big thing that I want to mention before going into it. It has been widened, and now when you're looking at it at this angle, it does look pretty significant, still not huge. I wonder if it's actually going to help out with the overtaking. Something I liked about last year's Monza is that the overtaking was pretty difficult. That's why we got that crazy fight between Leclerc and Carlos. But now you have a better chance going on the outside, which is typically the line that drivers try to take, and most drivers will defend the inside. I still think we're going to see a pretty good battle here if drivers tend to go for these overtakes. But with that being said, let's go over a lap in Monza on this historic track. It's not going to be a very long lap, but let's start it off on the start-finish line, going on this huge straight where the cars will definitely max out their top speed. Only something like Mexico could maybe provide a higher top speed. But going into turn 1, it's going to be an incredible braking zone that you have to hit the brakes very hard, and it's very difficult not to lock up here. You want to go as left as possible to prioritize the exit and set up a good turn 2. As you hit turn 2, you go then into turn 3, which yet again, you are setting up the exit in turn 2 to get a better shot at turn 3. We do sometimes see moves get set up between turns 1 and 2. Turn 3 is flat out, but a very beautiful looking corner, which then leads us at the end of sector 1 and into sector 2 with a very hard braking zone into turn 4 and 5. You go as right as possible on turn 4 to prioritize the exit in 5. You will clip a bit of the curb, but you want to get on throttle as fast as possible to then go into turn 6, which is probably one of the most difficult corners on the track. And tire stress will be heavy here in this corner, and as the tires degrade, we will see a lot of sliding and a very difficult corner to judge. Turn 6 and 7 are pretty much the same, but in 7 you prioritize the exit to get a great shot on that straight line speed. There aren't typically any overtakes that happen here because of the dirty air, and the car in front usually has the advantage here. But this is another DRS detection zone, and it goes into the most difficult part of Monza. This also ends our sector 2, but turns 8, 9, and 10 all go together, and in qualifying we're going to see the cars fly here. Probably one of the most beautiful shots we have in our calendar year. It's just awesome to see these cars fly, especially in that low downforce spec. I think with high downforce they would fly through this even faster. That then leads into another straight, which leads into that crazy turn 11 corner where clean air is king big time here, and setting up yourself going into the start finish line straight for turn 1 is very important, that you max out as much as you can that straight line. While it does look pretty simple, the track can actually be pretty difficult because of the low downforce and the tire problems that you could end up having by the end of the GP. But with that being said, let's go over my predictions with the best, the worst teams, and the top 5. It's been a while since I've done this. I'm glad to be doing it again. With the top 3 best teams, I do think we have a pretty set order of the top 4. I do think it's going to go back and forth depending on which track it is. And for this track, I actually do not believe that Red Bull will be the second best. First best, as I've been saying already, McLaren is going to be the strongest car here. I do think we're going to see a revival of Mercedes here. They're going to be in P2, and in P3, I think it's going to be a fight between Red Bull and Ferrari, and I do think Ferrari can actually probably fight with Mercedes. The most efficient car is the McLaren. I really doubt that Red Bull is going to have that pace, specifically because of the tire wear, and that understeer problem in turns 6 and 7 is really going to kill its pace if they don't nail the setup. They've been good throughout seasons, but as I stated in the video before, it's tough when you can actually add a little bit of load, but now everything's so close, you can't go for it like you used to before. As for the worst teams, yet again, it looks like Sauber is just by far the worst team. They're super far off the pace, so I'm going to have them in P10. In P9, It's definitely a toss-up. I think Haas has that straight line speed. I think Alpine is really going to struggle here, considering they've never really been a fast car in the straight line. But now Williams has kind of lost that advantage as well. So I'm going to go Williams in P9, and then I'm actually going to put RB in P8. I think Alpine might still have the edge because they have the better car. Even with them not having great straight line speed, I think their tire deck and everything should make up for that on the RB cars because they've been really bad in straight line speed throughout the season. Aston could be a surprise here. Look out for them. They have very fast straight line speed, but their tire deck sucks. So I think turns 6 and 7 are going to turn into a horrible mess for them towards the end of the GP. As for my top 5, let's go over them fast and quick. Actually, going from 5 to 1 is pretty difficult, but at number 5, I'm going to put in Carlos Sainz. I do believe he's going to get himself in the top 5. At number 4, I'm going to put in Leclerc. I think they're going to just miss the podium. I would love for him to be on the podium, but I just have this feeling he's not going to be up there. In P3, I'm going to put up Max. Regardless of the Red Bull not being the strongest here, I still think he's Max, so he's going to pull it off. P2, I got Oscar Piastri, and I do think Lando is going to pull off another victory here. I do feel like it's going to be a McLaren 1-2. With qualifying being so important, and Oscar Piastri does have that qualifying pace, I do believe they can run away with it and pretty much get in clean air and take the race from then on. Hopefully the race actually provides some dramatic events. I do think it's going to be closer than it was in Zandvoort. I think that 20-second difference really mattered off of Red Bull not having the optimized setup. But man, that McLaren car, that MCL is killing it. And I would be shocked if they're not P1 here. I do think it's going to get closer in the next coming races. I think Monza is an outlier, and I think that McLaren is so on top of it that other teams might struggle to find that optimal setup, even in a track that's so simple like Monza. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please give it a like and subscribe. It would mean the world, and peace.